And I'm one of the co-founders of Bitcoin Indonesia and the Bitcoin House Bali. So we are trying to educate the people in Indonesia about Bitcoin and money and freedom and all the related topics. And we provide free education for everybody. That's our mission. So we have around 26 meetups across the country every single month where local communities come together and learn about Bitcoin. And in Bali we have the Bitcoin House. And this is a education center and a community hub. It's open from Monday to Friday. People can come and ask their questions. They can join our workshops. So there's a Bitcoin for Beginners workshop, a kids workshop, a workshop for developers, plenty of things to do and to explore, and we really try to make it a fun and welcoming place where you can learn everything about Bitcoin.
No, it's okay. We'll use that. Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Efrat. All right, quick intro. I'm an independent journalist. I have a podcast named You're the Voice. Normally, by the end of the panel, everyone's asking, what's the name of your podcast? You're the Voice. I got into the Bitcoin space about 2.5 years ago. And for the past 1.5 years, I have the podcast, which is super cool. It's not just a Bitcoin podcast. It's quite diverse about many topics, but Bitcoin is one of them, offered as a solution for people who are looking for one. And I interview a lot of Bitcoiners, which is great. I live in Israel. I'm based out of Israel, and I'm Israeli, dual citizenship, Israeli and Australian. But I am in Israel, and yes, there is war in Israel. It's not fun. That's the second question everyone asks. So how is it in Israel? It's crap. It's a shit show. It's not nice. There is war going on, and I try to stay somewhere in the middle. I'm not pro this, pro that, anti this. I am anti many things, but not anti this government or that. I'm a dissident voice to the government of Israel, that's for sure. But I stay on team human, right? I'm on the side of human beings wherever they are, my neighbors and the ones that are with me in Israel. I'm often being asked how Bitcoin can change what's happening now in the Middle East. I think that we need to look at things short-term and long-term, and I don't think that Bitcoin right now can change something in the Middle East while we are during the war, but definitely Bitcoin has a huge impact on how wars are being created and fueled. And I put a lot of emphasis on that on my podcast when I speak to people about the incentive structure of fiat and the creation of violence and hate, which is very prevalent in the area I come from. So my mission is to try and stay above the noise and create some kind of a balanced voice to all the madness that is coming out of my area of the world by spreading truth on sometimes inconvenient truth about many things that people don't want to know, and also to try and give some hope to people in the shape of alternative solutions such as Bitcoin. So that's me.
And Mary, if you could introduce yourself quickly, that'd be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
My name is Mary Maswin. I'm the Global Marketing Manager at FEDI. And FEDI focuses on helping communities by providing what we call a community super app, which is run by communities for their members. And our focus is working with communities on the ground and using Bitcoin as a tool to help these communities and empower their members.
Hello, everyone. I'm Reina Chicas from My First Bitcoin. I want to apologize. I thought it was 15 minutes still to go. But thank you all for being here. And I'm going to be the host of this lovely panel that wanted to come here. Our panel is Building Projects and Communities in Bitcoin and Leading by Example. And we're going to start. We formulated certain questions for them according to what they do in their job and on their mission, basically. So let's start with Diana. Diana, you are deeply invested in Bitcoin social parts of the implications and its potential in Indonesia. So could you share some specific challenges and opportunities as well that you see in the Bitcoin adoption there?
Okay, so I think one of the biggest challenges that Bitcoin is illegal in Indonesia. That's quite hard if you want to drive adoption. So for everybody who doesn't know yet, it's illegal to pay in Bitcoin in Indonesia, and you basically go to prison if you do so. It's not only about Bitcoin, it's for all other currencies besides the Indonesian rupiah. So if you use the US dollar, if you use the euro as a form of payment, you can go to prison. And that's a very strict financial limitation. And this is one of the biggest challenge we face, because people are a little bit scared to use Bitcoin, and there was so much propaganda in the past years. So we have to overcome these belief systems, and we have to educate people about how beneficial Bitcoin actually is, and it's not a bad thing, and it's not a scam. It's real and it's helpful, and this is what we're trying to do. And you were talking about the social problems, right? So the financial freedom is one aspect, but then there's also no privacy. There's a lot of censorship. The government monitors social media contents, and they monitor websites. They block them. If you're a journalist and you want to speak up, you are most likely censored. And we try to educate the people about their rights, and we want to talk about the problems, and then they will understand the solutions, hopefully.
Great, thank you. And Mary, building a community-focused super app like Ferry that combines technology and finance, it's a little bit, I will say, challenging. It's a unique approach. So how does Bitcoin fit into the vision of Ferry, and how do you envision empowering local communities or advancing financial inclusion?
Okay, so that's a really good question. It is challenging, and but what we do at Ferry is that we empower communities using two things. So Bitcoin is one of them, and then Ferryment is another. But for us, the most important technology, aside from Bitcoin, is community. So what we do is we use Bitcoin. We use the Ferry app as a tool, and Bitcoin is that driver to enable communities to be able to use it to solve their problems. So whether it's like remittance issues, or even to onboard newbies into their community as well. And what was the other question? I know I'm missing something.
No worries. Like, how do you envision, empowering these local communities using that, and how others can take inspiration from it?
So one of the things we do is to make sure that there are people on the ground to help communities and guide them through this. So, for example, in Indonesia, we work with the Indonesian Bitcoin community, and we have someone on the ground, the people we call the masters. One of them is Dea. So when communities, like, for example, the Indonesia Bitcoin community have a question or they need guidance, so we host workshops and we provide that on-the-ground support. And because we believe in people a lot, we make sure that we are able to pass down the message across through our workshops and other trainings as well.
Yeah.
So everything is basically people focused.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have a number right now? How many communities are using it?
It's all private.
Okay. So let's go. Efrat, on your role, as you said, as a podcaster, journalist, freedom maximalist, how do you see Bitcoin challenging the current global narratives, the current, political structures, and what you share on your podcast that is not just about Bitcoin, but if you could share a story, from your work that highlights the Bitcoin's impacts in individuals, in freedoms?
Right. I can talk an hour about this question, but I'll try to squeeze it in as much as I can. Okay, so we clearly know and see that the financial global structure, financial monetary system is undergoing a change. We're kind of in the end of the Bretton Woods system, looking into, and I'm talking about the traditional finance system, right? Looking into the next evolution of the financial system, which will be digital and centralized. Whether it will be through CBDCs or nation-state stable coins, we don't know yet, but it will definitely be some sort of centralized, highly surveilled digital currency and a digital monetary system that will be intertwined together with some climate-related measures like ESG and digital identity. So we see those kind of vectors being implemented all throughout the world in different countries in various stages. Obviously, CBDC is a big chunk of that. So if that is the process that we are undergoing at the moment, and this is going to take time. This is not going to be launched tomorrow morning. As you can see, they're preparing the ground in various countries or continents in different ways. They essentially see two main threats to the implementation of that new evolution. The first threat is people. They're super afraid of the people themselves. So the power that be, whether it's global powers or governments, are highly concerned by the power of the people. So they are very conscious to try and do those changes in ways that will manipulate people. You guys know it so well from the fiat system, right? They manipulate people all the time by enslaving us without telling us what it is. And secondly, they are very threatened by Bitcoin. They understand the power of Bitcoin. They understand that this is a technology, or Bitcoin or any freedom technology. They understand that that has the potential of really freeing people up from the matrix that they've created. And they know that. And the reason I'm so sure that they know that is because I monitor closely the documentation that is coming out from governments and central banks around the world on the implementation of their next phases of this new monetary system. So first of all, you'll see in very sophisticated stages around the world, global leaders saying that the next monetary system will be a blockchain-based system, but it will be highly centralized. And people like Pippa Malmgren, who was the advisor to the United States president before Nixon. Her dad was an advisor to many U.S. presidents. She was growing up in a house that was basically dictating monetary policies to governments. And she's sitting there on global stages around the world and telling us what the next monetary system is going to look like. And people like Macron are calling for, the president of France, calling for a financial shock because of climate change. So they all know that this is coming and they're preparing us for it, but people are, on the most part, not paying attention. Bitcoin is the antidote for that, and I researched CBDCs very thoroughly, or stable coins, and I can see that with some of their paperworks, recently you've seen the European Central Bank coming up with a paper about how Bitcoin is enslaving people that don't have Bitcoin, right? Or in Israel, the Bank of Israel actually said that, don't worry, CBDC is going to be great, convenient, fast, and everything, and it's going to be issued by us, the entity that you know and trust, and not by some Satoshi Nakamoto that no one knows. They actually refer to Bitcoin by name, or Satoshi by name, right? Which is funny, like central banks actually talk about Bitcoin quite a bit. So they're threatened by that, which is, tap on the back for all of you guys, because that's the power of the people. And I think that we need to be aware of the power we have and continue to influence people in their work, which is what I do in my work, to just make them aware of how much power they have. They forgot of how much power they've got just by simply reclaiming sovereignty and taking back financial sovereignty and obviously all other kinds of sovereignty. We actually beat that system slowly and one by one, but that is a collective. That is part of a collective. So I think that that is kind of my story, because that's what I do. I've changed my life in the past 2 years in order to do just that, to research all that crap so that I can bring it to my audience and show them what's happening around the world, so that people are more aware, one, about the change that is coming, and two, about the alternative that exists and how they can step from that really dark path of CBDCs and stablecoins to the orange path of Bitcoin.
While we're at it, these topics that you cover, from global control to CBDCs, how do you keep this message accessible and engagement? What would be your advice? And not super scary. And what would be, because this is an educators conference, right? So what advice would you give to educators or advocates of Bitcoin also, that to simplify this and to try to make it accessible for these complex topics for the general public or normies? Yeah.
So rule number one is I always try to end on a hopeful message, so people don't stay black-pilled after the content that I give them. And I can do that because I'm in Bitcoin, right? So we can always bring the other side, the lighter side of things, and show them how Bitcoin fixes things. So that's rule number one. Rule number two is I use a lot of examples from the actual central bank's documentation and the government documentation, where I quote them, I show it out there, or I make a video about it, so that people, it's very hard for people to call me a conspiracy theorist when I actually bring the receipts. And so I encourage people to do that. And I give them my materials. Take it, use it wherever you want. I always reference to the source materials. It's quite a heavy topic, but if you try to make it bite-sized and go country by country, example by example, and try to pull the connecting thread between the different countries, you actually show a trajectory, you show a trend like that to people. Because if many countries are following the same path, or they're doing it in slightly different ways, then it's quite easy to just show the examples and then give your conclusion on how you see that this is similar in most countries and why it's coming over to you soon. So I use examples and always end on a hopeful note.
Great, thank you. So yes, Diana, you do also Bitcoin education in Indonesia, and Bitcoin education can mean like different things in various contexts. So from each of your perspective, guys, what is you believe that is the most essential aspect of Bitcoin education right now, and why? Yeah,
I can start. I think it's very, very important to understand the reason why Bitcoin was created in the first place, and why we need Bitcoin and what problems it really solves. So I think the most important part of education is that we talk about the personal impact and the social implications Bitcoin has, rather than talking about the technology aspects. People need to understand why they need Bitcoin and how Bitcoin can help them. And this is why, even though Bitcoin will become more convenient in the future and it will be easier to use it, people need to understand the core characteristics of Bitcoin, like the peer-to-peer concept, non-KYC, privacy, all these important things why Satoshi Nakamoto has invented Bitcoin. And I think we should focus on these, even though there will be new solutions, there will be convenient products and services for the newbies. I think even the newbies need to understand the core principles.
So I would say is trying to make Bitcoin as relatable to each community as possible. You know, the thing is that there are different communities that have their own unique culture, unique orientation. So when you're bringing the information of Bitcoin and how it solves these people's problem, trying to get to their level and show them ways it's relatable and practical, I think that is that adds to the stickiness of the power of Bitcoin and how it can help these communities together.
I think it's most essential to show people the trajectory in which Western democracies are heading. Most people think that maybe just in Indonesia you'll go to jail if you do something that is against the law, or in oppressive regimes or authoritarian regimes you'll have a hard time. But today, in most Western democracies, you're being censored as well. You can be put to jail for various reasons. They'll come up with all these new rules, and regulations in order to violate your rights under the guise of whatever virus or climate or whatever. And you just have to see the facade that they create on top of it. So I think it's most essential to show people that you are being oppressed and your wealth is in, and I'm talking about Western democracies because most people in Western democracies have some savings or wealth and they want to hedge it, and that's where I come from. So in modern cultures, those people need to see the trajectory and where it's going. And the easiest for me to do that is just to wait and see what banks are doing by closing bank accounts, access to bank accounts, by debanking people. This is stuff that is happening now in the West, and it never used to be that case. You just show them what kind of regulations are being put in place, why people are going to jail, what kind of new legislation they're creating. just put it out there for them. Let them see. Let them. I'm sorry that I'm saying that, but they're being fed by fear all the time. So at least they'll be fed by some realistic fear. I mean, that is fearful. That's the way your life is heading, and then by showing them that, and they actually start asking questions. Okay, so what do I do? So what's the solution? Then you can give it to them.
Yeah. And Diana, you live as a Bitcoin nomad, let's say, right? So that gives you like a little bit of a unique perspective and approach to this practical, way of living and challenges and opportunities that Bitcoin presents on your daily life. So what have been some of your surprising insights on your journey, and how these have shaped your approach and for education, like your experiences to shape your educational prospect? Yeah.
I think living with Bitcoin and a nomad gives me the opportunities that most nomads are looking for. Like, I can go wherever I want, I can take my money with me, I can get paid in Bitcoin no matter where I am, and these are benefits that a lot of digital nomads are looking for. But it has its limitations. So even though I want to live on a Bitcoin standard and I have all these possibilities, when I go to Indonesia, there are restrictions, and I can't use Bitcoin how I want to use it. So I have to find workarounds. I have to really know how I can use it on a daily basis. And I think this was a big learning for me, because even though Bitcoin is freedom and there are a lot of opportunities, we still need to understand how it's used locally. And when we teach people in Indonesia about Bitcoin, we have to teach them in a practical way so that they can still use it where they are. So we now focus on the local solutions and the local workarounds, and we try to give hints how to use Bitcoin, even though there are a lot of restrictions.
And continue, Diana. So let's say, looking into the future, what role do you think that Bitcoin education will play in shaping the next generation of understanding money, community, and technology?
I think Bitcoin, especially for the young generation, is a way to take control of their own future. It's an opportunity to rethink the system, rethink certain values, and to think independently and outside of the box, especially in a system which is often working against them. So if I have one advice for the young generation, then take control of your future by learning about Bitcoin.
Mary, in your experience, what has been the most effective ways of teaching communities about combining technology and Bitcoin and financial tools like Bitcoin, especially when some are skeptical, especially in the communities that you guys are at as well, skeptical, unfamiliar with these concepts of financial freedom and financial tools?
That's a good question. Actually, one of the most effective ways that we've seen is introducing Bitcoin through games. So basically, the idea is making it a fun and interesting challenge. And as people or members of the community are walking through each challenge, they're learning more and more about what Bitcoin can do for them. So they make the personal connection by themselves. I think, every Bitcoiner that I've met and had conversations with, I've noticed that we all relate with Bitcoin differently and uniquely. Most of us were orange pilled, right? Like, we were told about Bitcoin. Some of us got it instantly, some didn't. But the minute you're able to make your own personal connection with Bitcoin, it sticks. And from that day onward, you don't change your mind about Bitcoin. So in the same way, when people are introduced to Bitcoin through a fun game or a challenge, you start to ask yourself that what if this is true for me too? What if I can do this to solve a problem, a personal problem that I'm having? So if, for example, you're doing like a lightning torch, where someone has some Bitcoin and you're passing on to the next person, maybe for you, your personal issue is, how do I send money to my grandma who's in another country? And by the time you're playing this game, you're like, if my grandma was on the other end, Bitcoin could solve this problem. And it's super fast. So by making that personal connection through games, we found it like very effective for our community.
Making it relatable. Yeah,
Exactly.
correctly. And Efrat, if you would like to say something, like looking into the future, and what role do you think that Bitcoin education is going to will play in shaping this as well? Like, what advice would you say to beginners, and so they don't feel overwhelmed when they just came for the first time and have all of these concepts coming out to you, and you watch a podcast and you feel like it's too much? What advice would you give them so they don't feel super overwhelmed with too much information?
So I definitely show them that it's a journey, and I show them where to start. And I have this ready-made kit of resources that I like, that's just ready there for copy-pasting whenever someone asks me, okay, start here, first learn about fiat, here's a documentary of an hour and a half. Once you understand what's fiat system, then let's go into Bitcoin. There's a 1-hour tutorial, there's a free course, and there's a documentary, a 1-hour documentary. Start there, let's talk afterwards. And I also tell them to go to my podcast, and because it's entertaining and it's light and it's fun and it's not so threatening. And normally they come back to me with their questions wherever they are, and I know how to direct them. But really, if I need to look at, you asked about the next generation and why this is essential, right?
Essential for them in the sense of, like using the tool now, but you feel that also it's for adults, or you feel overwhelmed because you are young as well.
Right.
So it's okay. How, like you just said about ending with a note of the future. Have you shared this morning on our panel about the guy, and I think that would be a great story to share here.
Yeah, okay.
It was amazing.
So many people watch my podcast I put it on various platforms, so the audience is very different from one platform to another. So Substack, for example, my blog, is for people that use email. They don't use TikTok, right? So boomers mostly use email. So I have a lot of older audience, and from time to time they email me, dear Aflat, and one of them did, hi, I'm John, I'm 77 years old, I live in Northern California with my 3 dogs, my wife, and 6 grandchildren, I'm retired, and I keep waiting for the next episode of your podcast. I love it so much, and it recharges me. But I want you to know that because of you, I also bought Bitcoin. And he's fucking 77. So you never know. Like, you have no clue. Yeah, and I have quite a few of them, because they're like close to 5,000 subscribers on my blog, and they read emails. So we don't know how people get the message and what kind of medium they use, and that's why I love decentralized media, because we should be in as many places as possible to cater for different audiences. But I think for the younger audience, you guys don't have, you have an idea. Sorry, I'm sitting in El Salvador, I forget. People have an idea what kind of lifeline that is, but where I come from, it's not like here. Like, it's not legal. It's actually being shamed and ridiculed all the time, and people around me are dying day by day by day. And I see that horrible reality, but I also see into the future how we can build a reality. I don't know if in Israel or Gaza, because I personally think that those places are going to be quite ruined or diminished by the time this war is over. But then the next generation that comes in to build, if they are aware of the tools that exist in the world to build a new society that is not based on a corruption and greed as an incentive structure, but rather on collaboration and a win-win for everyone, then we can definitely be positive and hopeful for more peace in the world. And to just see kids dying every day and people dying every day is a horrible reality. And if we really want to change that, we have to do, like when you do your teeth, when you go to the dentist, you do a root canal, you really need to go to the core and start talking to them right from the beginning. What causes all this? And it's not a fun, light, entertaining conversation, but it's an important one to be had. And I think we're seeing some of those rewards here in El Salvador and other places around the world. But the West needs it, if not, just like you need it, if not more. So.
Yeah. And, you mentioned it this morning as well, and I know a lot of people know that you have a background, like we all have a background. So Bitcoin, I feel like often inspires you to shift a little bit of our careers. I know it did mine. We have tools, and we have learned and try to hone all the skills that we have to have a better quality of life and, be be financially independent and all of that. But what advice would you give to someone wanting to align their career with their purpose in life, with values that you personally guys advocate, and for a cause, for example, like Bitcoin education or like spreading the word?
Oh, okay. I'm like, oh, is that for me? Wow, this is a good question, but an important one because I was trained a lawyer. But one thing that helped me was, first of all, knowing what is important. And for me, it was two things. One, to help as many people as possible. And then two is to talk a lot. But so I would advise someone to like find out what's that thing that you enjoy doing, and then see how you can introduce Bitcoin into it. So I'll give you a good example. A lot of people know me for doing multiple things, but one weird or crazy idea that came to me was introducing Bitcoin, gaming in Bitcoin, and people were not doing it at all, or not as often. But one thing that I always ask myself is, how can I Bitcoinize this experience? Or how can I Bitcoinize this thing that I like so much? So for me, how could I bring Bitcoin into playing games? So all of us are interested in multiple things. So you ask yourself, how can I introduce Bitcoin? And there's always a Bitcoin way. Even if you've never seen anyone do it, Bitcoin gives you that space to actually practice that. Because in Bitcoin, the people in this space are open to new ideas because Bitcoin is very young and we are looking for ways we can push the limits. So ask yourself, what do I enjoy doing and how can I introduce Bitcoin? I think that is literally the key to richly transforming your career path. Because if you are going to be stuck in that mindset that this is all I studied and now I'm stuck, you will be stuck. But if you're like, okay, I can do whatever I want and using Bitcoin, then you will find a way. So another example, so my sister is also a lawyer, but she's interested in, she's always liked developing things. So she started off by, how can I build tools in Bitcoin and that will run with Bitcoin? And she was quite amateur at it, but she found a way. Until later on, she went into more deeper studies. So like there's always a way.
I totally agree to this. I would add that if you like what you're doing now, there's definitely a way to combine it with Bitcoin. And if you don't like what you're doing now, then you can change completely. As she was a lawyer before, I was a management consultant, and now I'm an educator. So everything can change, and Bitcoin is very open for everybody. And you can try out different things. Maybe try out to be a content creator, try out to be a podcast host. Maybe you want to join a community, whatever it is, try out different things and then find your sweet spot in Bitcoin and just go with the flow and find your ikigai in Bitcoin.
Yeah, totally everything you guys said, and I would just add, do some mental, spiritual work to understand who you are, who you really are, because we've been so disconnected from ourselves in recent years with the advent of these shiny prisons. And if we want to make a change in our lives, we have to start by going back to the roots, as I said before, and really investigating who we are, why we're here, why we came here, and what's our purpose, what really drives us. And once we know that, or we know it a little bit more, we try something and we experiment. We may fail and then we try again, but you know it when it's the right thing. You really know it, you feel it. And I think that the best proof for knowing that you are where you need to be, that knowingness, is really in when you feel that you are in service of another, when you are in service of humanity, and you do something because you just want to give and you just want to be there for someone else, and it gives you deep satisfaction when you do that, then you know you're in the right space. So if you're doing something like that and you have that sensation, that's probably a good compass, a good guide to drive that.
And I think Bitcoin gives you the chance to be appreciated for who you are. You don't have to fill a role. That's not what we do. And nobody can replace us or our work the way we are doing it. And I think this is very special about Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I think one of my favorite things, you know, you guys, I'm Salvadorian, born and raised, and I knew a little bit of a Bitcoin, but then once I got introduced to this great community, thanks to adopting Bitcoin actually 2 years ago, I believe that one of the most selfless jobs, works that we do, like, is what Bitcoiners do, because we get, you know, made fun of, ridiculousized a lot of the times, and we just keep going. So I feel like if it's one thing is that I've grown thicker skin, and I love it, because at the end of the day is the service that you're gonna do to others, instead of just, you know, going into your bed under your sheet and trying to cry because it was a bad day. It's already bad enough out there, and we just try to keep going. So, well, thank you guys. Thank you for your time and for coming all the way here. It's an honor for me to have you here in my soil, and welcome. I don't know if anybody has a question. We just have like 5 minutes. 4 or 5 minutes. Anybody wants to ask a question to our lovely ladies? Yeah.
Thanks. To Diana, how do you concretely overcome the hurdles and forbidden things in the country you are working with Bitcoin?
So in Bali, we recently, because we know that it's very important to use Bitcoin on a daily basis. It's not enough if we just talk about it. We have to use it. So we were trying to find ways to also create a circular economy in Indonesia and to onboard merchants. But it was very, very difficult because of the legal circumstances. And luckily, we have FEDI. So what we are doing in Indonesia is we created a so-called closed-loop system. And you can think about it like Starbucks. We always use the Starbucks example because everybody knows Starbucks. So at Starbucks, you can go and you can top up your Starbucks wallets with Starbucks points. So you pay fiat money and then you get Starbucks points, right? And then you can go to different merchants or different Starbucks locations and you redeem your Starbucks points. And our Starbucks points are called Bitcoin. So we have a closed-loop system and people can join our Indonesian Federation. This is the closed-loop system, so it's a closed system. And you can top up your FEDI wallet and have Bitcoin on your FEDI wallet, and then you can go to local merchants and redeem your Bitcoin. So the experience is actually the same as paying in Bitcoin, but from a legal perspective, it's different. And it's a small system now. We want to create a blueprint in Bali, in Indonesia, for other communities. So if it will work in Bali, then we can also give this to all the other places across the country.
They're being very creative.
We have to.
They are being very creative. They have to, yeah. This is what happens when you're being closed down.
Any more questions?